Right. I think we should continue this Q&A for a few minutes.
Sure.
And then if you want to, you can have your seat again. All right. Yes. Any questions? You want to text them in? I got a few in here. I think I've had a couple of questions about evolution. I think it'd be worth mentioning. Can you explain the difference between just purely Darwinian evolution from an atheistic standpoint versus what you're talking about?
Yeah. So Darwin came up with the theory of evolution by natural selection, which was a theory without any, I would say, it was based on observation. He had no biochemical knowledge whatsoever. He didn't know what genes were. He didn't even coin the word genes. He knew there was a principle of inheritance. And what he simply found was that he observed that there's variation in life and that some varieties do better than others. So, and he called that fitness. So if we're living in some situations, you would be much more fit than me based on height. Okay? Because sometimes
there was a tree that I could only reach the fruit. And I was truly survival, and I'm like, I'm not sharing my fruit with you.
There you go. There you go. On the other hand, there are cases where, for example, in a very hot climate, it's better to be short and small and have a bigger surface area. So in those cases, you would die out.
Done.
And my crew, well, I'm not that short, but shorter. I would do better. So fitness is a very complicated and kind of semi-scientific idea. We don't have a measure. It depends on the environment. It depends on lots of things. So that was Darwinian theory. And then, of course, we had lots of scientific advances. We learned about genetics. We learned about genes. We learned about all kinds of interesting mechanisms, like everything I showed you, about how life works. And so evolution became more of a scientific theory and could explain a lot of things very well. But it is not a complete theory. That is my view. And I say that because there are many aspects of life, including the origin of humanity and consciousness, and even within some areas of, diversity of life in animals and plants that are not quite clear evolutionarily. So there's still a lot of way to go.
Yeah, in your book you mentioned the three origins as really pretty strong evidences in terms of, for God's existence, the origin of the universe in and of itself, the origin of life, and the origins of consciousness, or really what makes humans exceptional and distinct from the other.
Yeah, and there are no good theories for any of those. The origin of the universe, we have the Big Bang, but we don't know what made it bang. Why was there suddenly a bang? Nobody knows. And the general scientific view is that there's something called the Planck time, which is a very tiny unit of time. It's 10 to the minus 43 seconds. Okay, that's pretty fast. And we can't go back any further than that. So, in other words, there was the Big Bang at time 0, and then 10 to the minus 43 seconds later, the forces and laws of nature were evident. But between 0 and 10 to the minus 43, blank. We can't say anything based on what we now know in physics. With the origin of life, I think I demonstrated there's an awful lot we don't know. We can't figure out. I'm not saying we will never do this. I'm not saying that science is over. I'm saying that we need new science. And the kind of new science that we need is, for example, new laws and theories of biology. Evolution is not enough. We need some new ideas, and I think they will involve purpose and teleology. And at some point, we may end up, I think we will end up, if we're open to it, by we, I mean the scientific community now, if we're open to it, we will end up saying, I think, you know what? We need something else. We need God to understand this. And how that's going to work, I don't know. But I do believe that.
Amen. All right, let me see. Any other questions? Let's see. Somebody wants to know, what would you say your biggest achievement is in your career?
Mine? Finding God. I mean, I whatever number 2 is, it's not, it's
So
far away.
So tell us what you're working on now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this idea that self-replication is not something easily explained is something that I've been actually doing theoretical work on, and I've published 2 papers on it in the scientific literature, in the mainstream literature. And I used, it's very technical, but I used a statistical model to show that there's a threshold for replication fidelity, in other words, the accuracy of replication. If you go below that threshold, you can't get life, and you can't get evolution started. So what I'm saying is that it can't start from 0 and then go on. It has to start from a certain level. And the implication of that is that we need to understand how that can happen. And we don't have any theories. There's no scientific theory to know how that can happen. So that's what I'm working on now.
And for those who would say, well, maybe life was seeded from another planet, that doesn't really solve anything,
No,
does it?
exactly. So what happened there?
Right. Yeah, it just keep.
That's a very likely possibility, but it doesn't answer the question.
Yeah. Well, I've learned so much tonight. I've been so thankful for Dr. Gart's time. And if we could just give him a round of applause. Yes. We're so grateful for your time this evening. And we're going to have the worship team come back out and lead us in one more song before we go. So if you wouldn't mind, as the worship team comes out, if you all would stand and worship with us one time tonight.